welcome to the On Iowa podcast. I'm Leah, Vann, the Hawkeye beat writer for the Cedar Rapids Gazette. And today we have the unverified closet Nebraskan David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports.
Yep.
So I'm really excited. David, how are you doing?
Oh, man, I'll tell you what, that was a much nicer introduction than I thought I was going to get. So it's all good. Thanks for having me on, Leah.
Yes, you're, did the unverified hurt a little bit?
Honestly, at this point, it's just sort of in one ear, out the other, because it's so overused at this point. Maybe get some new material, but other than that, we'll be all right.
Yeah. I feel like we should have some sort of reference to Pop Smoke, Juice World. I think what we need to make clear to everyone is not everybody knows, but you are actually a Juice World. Juice World is your number one rapper, not Pop Smoke.
No, here's the thing. I guess to clear that up right away. Yeah, I mean, I think I had 23,000 minutes of Juice World last year, according to my Spotify. So I don't even think Pop Smoke made the top 5. It was sort of I don't know. It is kind of funny how that whole
Pop
thing
Smoke
came about.
didn't make the top 5, Hawkeye Nation.
I don't think so. I know.
You heard it here first. Pop Smoke did not make the top 5.
Watch. She's gonna be like number 2 or number 1, 2, or 3 this year, and then it's just gonna be all right. Well,
Hey David, you know what I need you to do? I think you need to verify that for our listeners.
Oh, wow. All right. Sick. This is going about as well as I thought so far. So Leah, oh goodness gracious.
It's funny. I'm trying to think about, it was Mark Morehouse who told me that the two of us should do a podcast together. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think that was the moment when I did follow you on Twitter, but apparently you folled me and then you unfollowed me until I followed you back. Is that correct?
I don't know. I'm not very good at verifying things apparently, Leah, so I'm not sure if I really can.
So David,
I can neither confirm nor deny. The report per sources.
Well, and I think you got offended because I haven't liked, 3 of your last Instagram posts?
It's fine. It's cool. I just gotta step up my game apparently.
Yeah, clearly.
It's fine.
Yeah, I guess I'm either a terrible friend or it just,
Oh man. Yeah.
So I'll keep stepping
up.
What?
I said, yeah, I'll just keep trying to step it up.
Yeah, I think you should. I mean, aren't you raising the standard?
I don't know what you're talking about. That's an interesting phrase. No, I don't think I've ever heard that before. I may have to use that somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of raising the standard, we are going to break down this spring football, wrap it up, tie it in a bow, because this is the last time we will see this team for a long time, for a couple months. And we're going to talk some NFL draft. So Let's start off with spring football while it's still kind of fresh in our minds. I mean, I feel like it's fading. It kind of faded with my runner's brain on Saturday. But what were your takeaways from Saturday's open practice?
I think it's tough to really take too much away from spring practice. I mean, obviously it's our job to overanalyze everything. I think the number one thing though, is that defense is going to be legit. I mean, I know it feels very early to say that, but the secondary has really impressed me. I think Riley Moss is poised for a big year. I mean, he was arguably the most impressive player, I think, in both spring practices. Had an interception in each of the practices, pass deflections. And I think the defensive line, for as much uncertainty as there is there are guys stepping up across the board. We didn't even get to see some of the guys that we wanted to healthy. I think of guys like Yahweh Black, who I think he's going to be the starting right defensive tackle. He's going to be a major part of that team as well. Lucas Van Ness, I thought, played great. Maybe he steps into that backup defensive end role. But the defense, I think, across the board in general, there's a lot to be very excited about. And I think the linebacker room especially, to touch on that, I think Justin Jacobs got better, noticeably better over the course of spring ball. I think Jack Campbell is poised to be one of the better linebackers probably in the Big Ten. And as far as the offense goes, spring football is good for them. Let's put it that way. I don't know how you feel about this. I always feel like the hardest position group to sort of analyze in spring football is the offensive line. I almost typically expect that to be a shaky wherever you go to school or how much experience is there. And I think there's no exception what happened. I think the offensive line was shaky, but keep in mind they're trying to replace 2 starting tackles, and they have a new coach in George Barnett, who I think is going to be a very, very good hire based on the early reviews and sort of at least some film and stuff we've seen about him. But I think there's a lot to take away, but at the same time, there's also a lot more questions that need to be answered. And I think including, probably get to this, the starting quarterback, because I do think there's going to be a legitimate battle here.
Yeah, I think maybe I'm in the minority here. I don't think there's going to be an actual quarterback competition, but I did want to touch on this thoughts on the offensive line. They were not looking amazing on Saturday. And I couldn't tell if it was, this is another thing about spring football, is it's your own team. And so I was wondering like, oh, is the defensive line just that good? Or is the offensive line struggling, right? I mean, you obviously have Tyler Linderbaum at center, who's very consistent, but there were also a lot of people out, and I don't know. It just seemed like Tyler Goodson was struggling to get some good yardage at first, and he kind of found his stride. And I always kind of, when it comes to the running game, I always look at the offensive line, right? Because it's, that's kind of what makes the running game. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, but I also know this is Iowa. The offensive line is going to be solid. It's going to be fine on time. I thought the defensive line looked awesome. And I know that I was going through my interviews with Zach Van Valkenburg, and, he was saying, oh, there's still work to do, but it was kind of funny because I think we were in the little scrum and one of the reporters asked him, like, do you think that the defense won today? And he kind of stuttered. He's like, well, I don't, and then he's like, there's still work to do. I'm like, yeah, the defense won today. Come on, Zach.
I think Kirk Ferentz's quote summed it up best. And this is sort of my thought when it gets to this point in spring ball is at this point, the defense knows the offense better than the offense knows the offense. And I think especially when you look at how experienced that secondary is and that linebacking group, and then you have a guy like Zach Van Valkenburg at edge, I think that's just true. And I think on top of that too, you have to keep in mind, it is worth noting that Tyrone Tracy didn't practice in the final spring practice. Nico Reganey, Iowa's probably number 2 receiver, has been out. So they're working with some new pieces there. And I think when you're dealing with a defensive line that knows what plays are coming and all that, no matter how great of a running back you are, you're really not going to be able to get the yardage rushing. I think that's what we saw Tyler Goodson do. So I think the offense definitely made some strides, but I think it's sort of a mixed bag, right? It's like, how much do you actually take away from it? I think it's good talking points, but I think we're going to know a lot more when it comes closer to the season, just how much spring ball actually helped. Because I think the thing that I try to look for in the spring ball, Leah, I don't know how your process kind of works with it. I compare, since we got 2 open practices, I went by, okay, what did we see 2 weeks ago and how much better did they get in that 2-week span? Because that's sort of that growth that you kind of want to see. And I mean, you can think of some players, I think, right on the spot. I mentioned, I think Justin Jacobs got better. I think Kayvon Merriweather, I think he's going to be a big breakout star in that secondary just based on his athleticism and his size and now experience. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's just kind of my 2 cents about it is I think that the offense just, while they know what to do, I think the defense, again, just they're so used to practicing against them. So it's not like a normal season, right? Like a game week where they're giving them different looks against scout team, practicing against who they're going to go up against. For the last month, they've just been playing against their own offense, their own defense. And I think at some point, the defense, I'd be more concerned if the defense didn't sort of take over at this point.
That's a good point. And I think the secondary looks solid, like Kayvon Merriweather. I mean, great playmaker. You mentioned Riley Moss. I thought they both had a good spring. I was disappointed we didn't really get to see Matt Hankins because I think he was out for both practices. And then, I mean, there were some members of like the defensive line and the linebackers that were missing, but even whoever was there on the field really just like did the job. So, and I think it was Kirk Ferentz who said, yeah, I feel pretty confident about the backfield, like having a solid, like 6 starters, that he can probably name off the top of his head. Yeah, I want to talk about this offense though. And, how much can we take away from spring ball? I think the offense, the way I see it is it's going to be inconsistent. I look back at like Texas's spring ball and they're not remotely the same team at all, but I will say it was kind of a similar takeaway in which like the offense struggled, but the defense was pretty solid. Right. And so maybe you're right when you say, or when Kirk Ferentz said was like, the defense knows the offense better than the offense knows the offense right now. And so I don't know if that's just part of how like spring football practice works, but to me, the wind didn't help, right? Like there were a lot of passes that were either overthrown or just kind of carried by the wind. What I will say about Spencer Petras is like normally when he's like missing passes, it's like not anywhere in the vicinity of where it should be. And I feel like this time I was like, okay, if he missed a pass, it was an incomplete pass, it was at least in kind of the right place. And that was what Ferentz was saying on Saturday. So that also could be attributed to the wind. I think he has pretty good chemistry with Sam Laporta. And I really would have loved to have seen Tyrone Tracy, throw down out there, but that just circumstances like did not give us that opportunity. And then, he was pretty solid with Charlie Jones and Max Cooper, who I know are pretty I know Charlie Jones is pretty much a returner kind of guy, and Max Cooper has dealt with injury and is pretty far down the lineup, but I thought that Spencer did well given the conditions that he was playing in. I was not super impressed with the two other quarterbacks. I don't know what your take was.
So, I mentioned earlier that there's a quarterback competition, quote unquote. I do think Petras will be the start when week one comes about. I'm not saying that, Deuce Hogan or Alex Padilla is going to sort of rise up to that. But I will say this. Alex Padilla, I still think was the most impressive quarterback out of the two in both practices. I think Padilla's command of the offense right now, not that it's on a different level, but the dude stepped in, and granted it's spring ball. You probably should step in with that sort of confidence, and Spencer has the game starting experience, but the crispness of Padilla's passes, I think he throws a nice tight spiral. He's not afraid to escape the pocket. He looks comfortable throwing on the run. And what I kind of saw of Spencer that gives me at least sort of, kind of a red flag in my head was all spring ball. We've talked about how the goal is for him to get rid of the ball in 2.5 seconds or less because the stats are just substantially better, right, when he gets rid of the ball quick. And I think with Iowa lining up so much in shotgun, I think there's an emphasis to really get the ball out quick. With that being said, though, there were a handful of times on Saturday where I think he was so focused on just getting rid of the ball that he didn't go through his progressions. I think the one wheel route to Tyler Goodson, I think it only lasted like 1.8 to 1.9 seconds, maybe 2 seconds at most. He didn't really look at any other options, and he threw it into double coverage to Tyler Goodson on that wheel route, and that's a pick. And it probably would have been a pick six had it been an actual game. So that's something that kind of, strikes me as, I don't want to say odd, but those are the type of things that'll cost you games, especially early on when you look at Iowa's schedule when they host Indiana and then they go at Iowa State, which it's kind of crazy to think about. Those two schools aren't typically powerhouses when it comes to football, but these would be two top 15 teams going into the season. So
Definitely.
I think that's something that gives me a red flag. Deuce Hogan, I think Deuce Hogan's upside is there, but I also let the Deuce loose. I'm never going to forget us making that up. Anyway, I think Deuce Hogan's upside is incredibly high. I still think he needs another year to really develop. But I do really like his skill set and his physical makeup for what an Iowa offense and what they like in an Iowa quarterback to be. But in short, Spencer Petras still did some good things. I think he's showing a little bit more touch on his deep passes, but he can't rely on, I got to get rid of the ball, because if that happens, defenses get picked on that, and that's just going to lead to interceptions.
Yeah, I would rather, especially if the offensive line ends up being as strong as it is, like you take your time just a little bit. And I know that, I know the stats, but this isn't Moneyball, right? Like football, it's some of the stats are like, yeah, this is useful. And sometimes like, maybe we can't Moneyball this. So I don't know about the whole 2.5 second release. I've seen the stat about it, but I don't know if that's a coincidence. I don't know if that's a true trend, causation, correlation thing, I will say Padilla does have a crisp spiral. I will agree with you on that. I will agree with you that he's better on his feet. So if there's a play that seems to be collapsing, I think I would put Padilla in over Petras, right? So because I feel like he's going to find that hole and he's going to run the ball at least like 2 to 3 yards rather than just going down, right? I think Deuce probably will have the biggest arm, and I'm biased because I'm from Texas, and I think that is like something that we just do well in Texas. I mean, you look at all the NFL quarterbacks in the past that are from Texas; they are big time pocket passers. So I think that he does have a lot of room to grow. He definitely is not a starting quarterback this year. I think that's like pretty solid to assume. I was really impressed with Gavin Williams this spring ball. I'm really excited about him. And I know we've got Ivory Kelly-Martin coming back, and we've got Tyler Goodson. I don't know. I'm kind of like wanting to see a little bit more of him. Kind of want to see a little bit of Desmond Hudson at wide receiver, or, one of these young guys like Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce. I mean, some of these younger guys were kind of just exciting to watch. And maybe it was just because they're like, this is my chance to play in front of fans right now. So I don't know what your thoughts are on some of these young guys.
Yeah, I'm happy that you brought Gavin Williams, because I think he was one of the more impressive players in spring ball. And I mean, so I scouted him a few times in high school when he was at Southeast Polk, when he went to Dowling Catholic. The amount that he has grown from just a pure running back perspective is pretty crazy in this short of time. So back in high school, he was a very straight downhill, up and down runner. Couldn't really juke out anybody. Not that he had quick feet, but he just didn't have that sort of natural shiftiness that we see like a Tyler Goodson have, right? The play that stuck out to me was in that first spring practice. I don't know if you remember it. I think it was an 18-yard touchdown where I think it was a halfback counter, and he cut back. And I just didn't ever see him do that in high school. And right then it's kind of eyebrow raising, like, okay, he's actually starting to really piece it together. And he's a strong kid. He's a fast kid. I think he's a very, I wrote about this a couple of times, but I said, I really think that when Ivory Kelly-Martin comes back, I think Gavin's going to really push for that number 2 spot. Not that Ivory can't do some good things on the field, because he can. He's a very fast runner. He's got that shiftiness. But Gavin right now brings something different to the table in this running back room. I think the running back group as a whole needs to improve receiving. Tyler's a very hit or miss guy, and he even self-admitted, like, yeah, he needs to continue to develop his hands. But I really think Gavin in goal to go situations, third and short, I think he's the guy that can really, really make some big plays happen. Maybe he's a guy that gets 10 to 12 carries. Tyler Goodson gets 20 to 25. Then you throw in Ivory Kelly-Martin in that bunch. But I like you said, I was very impressed with him in both practices. I think he made standout plays in both. And as far as Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce, I thought Arlen Bruce had a great second practice. I think he had more opportunities, granted. Yes. I think you already know what play I'm going to talk about, but that pass that got deflected, he caught, then went to the 5-yard line. Like, that's just a football player type play. And
that was awesome. Can we just crazy. Emphasize that play real quick? Because I don't think it was meant for him, right? Who was it that tipped it off? Was it Luke Lachey?
I think it was Lachey. I don't think it was Laporta. I think it was one of the backup tight ends. It might have been Yelverton. I don't want to say. It was one of the younger guys, though. It
was meant for one of them. The ball deflects off of their hands, and then Arlen's just like, yeah, I'm just going to grab this and run into the end zone. It looked like backyard football, except it was so fun. And I was like, there's a playmaker. There's a guy who's really, really trying to show off and is having fun with it. Number one. Number two, that's a ridiculous play, right?
It is. And the thing is, too, you got to remember about Arlen. He's still a new receiver. For his first 3 years in high school, he played a Wildcat quarterback and played running back. Then when he got finally eligible, when he transferred to Ankeny High School, they moved him to sort of a running back wide receiver hybrid. So this is his first real full year of actually being, and not even a year, a semester of being a wide receiver. And I've been impressed with what he's done. And Kelton Copeland and Kirk Ferentz and them have said the same thing. And I'm writing about this. I'll have this article out later. But one of my big takeaways from this spring Keegan Johnson's going to be a part of the wide receiver rotation. After watching him both practices, hearing all the praise from him, I don't know what your thoughts are about it. I don't know how you keep him off the field. I know Nico Reganey is going to come back and have one of the top spaces. Tyrone Tracy obviously has to be number one guy. Charlie Jones is probably still slightly ahead of Keegan. But, I mean, Kirk said after the practice, the final one, that Keegan's on that same level as Desmond Hudson, Deontay Vines, Max Cooper, and those guys. And when you look at the tape and you sort of think about at least my notes from the couple spring practices, Keegan brings something different. I think he is going to be a big playmaker in this offense. Not that he'll start this year. I don't think he will. But I'm talking about maybe he can – I think he can emerge as high as the number 3 wide receiver on the team. I think he's going to be at least number 4. Like, Keegan's upside is – I don't want to put too much pressure on, but his upside is incredibly high, especially for a Kirk Ferentz type wide receiver. Like, Keegan does a lot of things well. And I think the maturity he has shown throughout going through spring practice and everything, I think that's seriously going to help him as far as just translating from spring ball to summer workouts to fall camp and on the field in the fall. I think there is going to be a big spot for him.
Well, and I think it's funny because both of those wide receivers kind of have the blood of being an NFL caliber, like, or, big playmakers. I mean, Keegan comes from actually your alma mater, Nebraska. His dad won the national championship. And then, Arlen Bruce, I think his dad plays Canadian football. And so it's kind of, I don't want to say it's in their blood and, not have them work hard, but I will say what I like about Keegan is, like, he seemed very steady. He was not going down on the first tackle. Like, he's the kind of guy who can extend plays, which is really important to an Iowa offense that Brian Ferentz says will focus on shorter passes and accuracy and relying on those playmakers to make those plays. I think Arlen has tremendous footwork. I think both of them honestly could be in contention for that third wide receiver spot. And I think Kirk Ferentz was saying that on Saturday. He was like, it's anybody's game right now. Like, that third position is really up for grabs. And I'm just trying to see who's going to work for it. And I think that Charlie Jones had a really great game and he looked great, but I don't know. Kirk was really alluding to him as mainly a punt returner. And I know how much Charlie really wants to be contributing more at the wide receiver position than he has in the past. But again, it's pretty stacked, Tyrone Tracy, Nico Reganey when he's back. And I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds on the field this fall. So
I like your, by the way, up for grabs wide receiver. Nice pun. Anyway, 10 of 10. I appreciate that.
Like a chat show, honestly.
but no, I mean, like you said, here's my thing too, and this is on the record, so I'll make my first hot take of the 2021 season right now.
Is none of this on the record? Is this all off the record?
Yeah, funny. Yeah, you're funny.
We're on a podcast right now.
Tyrone Tracy will be Iowa's first all Big Ten wide receiver since 2011 or 2012, and Marvin McNutt had it. I think that Tyrone's skill set is going to be on full display this year. And I have high, I'm not saying first team, but I think he can be a second team caliber, third team caliber. I think he's got all the tools and I think he can put it together. Especially if they want to go quick offense and quick passing. I mean, Tyrone's the guy that extends plays. He's got that size, strength, and speed that you want in some of those wide receivers. So I think there is that, but yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more needs said about the wide receivers other than there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of high potential guys, but it's all about how do they utilize the work in the spring and ultimately how does it get transitioned on the field on Saturdays? Because we always see guys that ball out in springtime. We always hear about, oh, he's a great practice guy. He's really working hard. And yes, that does count for something. You shouldn't dismiss that. But what's going to matter at the end of the day? It's the product that's going to be put on the field on Saturdays. So I think these guys have potential to translate to Saturdays, but it's all about, are they going to be able to do it? I think that it's going to be very interesting. I do think we're going to see a different sort of Iowa offense, as crazy as that sounds. Yes, they're going to be, run first, pass later. But as far as the passing game goes, I do think they're trying to revamp the pass game a little bit. Whether it's for the good or bad right now, We'll see. We'll see.
I don't know if we throw out our conspiracy theory right now, because I will say on the Tyrone Tracy topic, I will agree with you on that, because I remember watching him in one of the few games that I saw last year when I was interviewing for this job, and I was like, why don't they play this guy more? Like literally, I saw him catch a couple passes, and I was like, this guy seems to be like really good. He only got 2 plays like this game, or 2 passes, and he really made something of it. But yeah, I don't know, like how many wide receivers did I count on the roster? What was it, close to like 15? And then we're at like 7 or 8 tight ends. So I don't know, what if in a crazy world, what would you do with this offense? If you were Kirk Ferentz, what would you do? Like, how would you change this up?
Here's why I'm curious about what they do with Tyrone. I want to know what position they're going to play him, because if you look back when he was a redshirt freshman, when Brandon Smith got hurt for the last 5 games of the year, they put Tyrone at X where Brandon was, and Tyrone balled out. He played the best football of his career. I'm talking 80 yards a game, sometimes over 100, had a couple long touchdown plays. He'd be an undersized X, but ultimately, again, it's going to be all about the production there. And he produced at that point. So maybe you throw Tyrone at the X. You can mix in Nico and Arland in that sort of slot role. I think you throw Keegan where Emir Smith-Marset would play. I think that the way his route running is, I don't think Keegan's the fastest straight line guy, but if he is a crisp route runner, he's got reliable hands, I think you throw him there. I think there's a number of options there. And as far as the tight ends go, I'm really excited about the room, but there's just so much unanswered questions, because they have some of the highest ceiling guys they've had in a while, I think, at least as far as recruiting goes and how that sort of translates. Like, I think Elijah Yelverton has a very high ceiling. He looks like the second he walked onto campus, he looked like a college ready tight end. I mean, he's 6'5", 250, strong. Luke Lachey was an All-American tight end in high school. His dad was an Ohio State Buckeye all-time great offensive tackle, offensive lineman. And I think he'd be a great red zone threat. But then you have Sam Laporta, who has shown flashes as well. So again, I think the tools are there, but if I had to make a change, I don't know what they're doing as far as this goes. I think Desmond Hudson's still not ready, maybe not to his fault. We heard what happened with him last year as far as having to isolate 3 different times due just contact tracing of COVID.
Yeah.
And I think he had a minor injury. I really think you explore the possibility of playing Tyrone at that X, especially since he showed what he can do against Big Ten quality defenses.
Yeah, I agree with you. We should move on to the draft. But yeah, I think it's been fun to have spring football. I'm actually like I'm missing it this week. I was like, oh, tomorrow I have press conferences. No, I have none. So
I have nothing.
Yeah, everything just got super boring, and now I don't get to watch football for a while. But yeah,
such a
NFL
tease
draft,
too. Such a tease.
What was like the biggest shocker to you in this NFL draft? Like, was it the Davion Nixon, kind of moving down, or what?
I think that obviously has to be one of the top 2 things. I'll say that I think I'm not going to say it's Davion just based on recent draft buzz going into it. I'm going to say it's more Chauncey Golston going in day 2. I think it was a good pick on day 2, because I think if you just look the year by year improvement, the starting experience, the sort of tools that he has, and the type of teammate that Kirk has publicly said all of his teammates have rated about, Kelvin Bell, and you heard he crushed his interviews. I think it has to be Chauncey going day 2. I think it was a worthwhile day 2, but I mean, we heard Chauncey going as late as rounds 5 or 6, even as late as a week or 2 ago. So hearing himself a nice paycheck, I think he fell into a really good situation. I know you were thrilled, and that might be underselling it a little bit when Chauncey got to Dallas.
Context.
But
I'm going to interrupt you for context. Got a little emotional. Well, it was also like, so I called David and I was like crying because I was like, an Iowa player got chosen by the Dallas Cowboys. Like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to write about a guy from Iowa getting chosen by my favorite NFL team. And I spoke too soon because guess what? Brandon Smith signed with the Cowboys as free agent. So I don't know. Maybe they heard that Iowa, they're like, our favorite Texas girl is up in Iowa.
You told me that you had Jerry on speed dial, so I assumed you took care of it. I assumed you took care of it.
Totally.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it has to be Chauncey, though. I mean, again, I think it was a good pick. The Davion thing still surprises me a little because you just look at the dominant performance that he had all season long. I mean, Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year doesn't lie. Now, before I say this is in full context. This is from people who I've talked to in the know as far as the NFL scouting world and stuff that I have read. This is not my criticism. So before, Iowa fans might come after me when I say this, there was some skepticism and speculation about Davion not giving full effort every play, that he took plays off. Yeah, he was outstanding when he was fully integrated in the play, made big plays happen, without doubt, a big playmaker. But there were worries around NFL circles that the motor might not be there, and he did take plays off. And I ultimately do think that was a reason why he did fall off some draft boards.
Yeah, I mean, we can never know what goes on behind closed doors, and that's why these mock drafts are always kind of a joke. And that's why sometimes your post NFL draft grades are also a joke, because there's only so much that we can really find out. And I think we're finding out less and less about these players over time. And what we do know is his resume, and like how he played this past season and the progression that he made from 2019 to 2020 seasons, right? Like, we know how much better he got, but we don't know the other stuff, right? And so I don't know. I thought it was shocking that he fell as far as he did. I don't know how he fits in with the Carolina Panthers, but I was happy to see him go on a team. Obviously, I wrote a big profile on him and got to know his family really well. So I wished him the best on that.
Sure.
And then, we've got Ihmir Smith-Marsette making history. First Iowa wide receiver to be drafted since 2012, right? Was it Marvin McNutt?
I think it was Marvin McNutt went in the 6th round. I think he was Carolina. Is it either Carolina or is the Eagles? One of the two.
I think it's the Eagles. And then
I think it is the Eagles.
Yeah, and it was there was that Michael Oz had a column on it today on kind of the history of this, but it's the 4th wide receiver in the Kirk Ferentz era to be drafted. Yeah. It's going to be interesting because, obviously there's more wide receivers coming through the Iowa program now more than ever. And I don't know. I wonder if this is the start of something. What's your take?
I think Tyrone Tracy's getting drafted. Number one. I don't know when he goes, but when he goes, I think it'd be ridiculous to not have Tyrone drafted. On top of that, too, from all indications, he's an outstanding kid. I covered him in high school a little bit, talked to a lot of people in the know around the Indianapolis area. Him and his family are just very highly respected around the area. And we've seen what he can do on the football field. I think that, you need to give Kirk some credit, but I will say one of the most impressive coaching jobs I have seen across college football, at least since I've been following college football, is what Kelton Copeland has done with the Iowa wide receiver room. When he got to Iowa 4 years ago, there were 2 scholarship receivers on the roster at the time, just 2. One of them never even caught a pass. The other one was, I think, Matt Vandenberg was the other one. And the way he's been able to recruit and develop guys like Ihmir Smith-Marsette, like Brand Smith, to get a Tyrone Tracy, to get a pair of 4-star receivers in the 2021 recruiting class by 24/7 Sports, and Brody Brecht, who I think will be a playmaker down the line, especially in the red zone with the attributes that he has. I think you need to give Kelton Copeland a lot of credit. I think he's still a young coach. I think he's got very, very high upside. I think that there might need to be conversation for an expanded coaching role on the offensive side in the future, just based on what he's done. But I mean, you look down the Iowa roster. I mean, there's a number of guys you can see getting drafted. Again, I'll go Tyrone Tracy. I think, like you mentioned, Keegan Johnson and Arlen Bruce, I think are possibilities as guys who, they're off to a strong start. If they can continue to piece it together, stay healthy, and stay on the upward trajectory, we'll be talking. Again, super young guys. This is not to put any pressure on them, but they're doing the right things at first. And clearly, if they're running reps with the 1s and 2s constantly, like they have been, they're doing something right. So I think you need to give Kelton Copeland a lot of credit there. And if Iowa can continue to sort of expand the offensive game and put the wide receivers in a playmaking position, we'll see what happens. But it is kind of crazy when you think about how many guys Iowa does put in the NFL. And, one of the most common positions that schools are known for is what? Wide receivers and defensive backs, right? And Iowa just has not been able to really put guys in the draft through the wide receiver position. But I think it's going to be a long process still, but I think they're in better hands than maybe they've been in a long time.
Yeah. And I remember I've spoken to a couple of recruits now that I've done some of those recruiting spotlights, and people like Brody Bragg. I talked to like Arlen Bruce a little bit. I've talked to Keegan Johnson, and they all were very sold on Kelton Copeland. And, I remember, I just feel like they were all very sold on what he was selling. And I don't know how you sell, wide receiver at Iowa, right? Like, how do you sell like that to a recruit who's like looking to be a playmaker, right? So that I do want to know a little bit more about how he was able to kind of build this position from the ground up. It seems like when he got on campus, like to what you were saying. And Ihmir Smith-Marsette was picked ahead of Davion Nixon actually by like one pick for Minnesota Vikings, which is crazy. I mean, I don't think any of us would have predicted that. I think we were all kind of like, oh, maybe. And I know that him being a returner was a big boost to his draft stock. And I think that, the versatility that Iowa preaches when it comes to all of its positions, but especially to wide receivers, you can't just run, you can't just jump, you gotta be able to do it all. And I think that that's going to bode well for some of these guys who are looking to continue the trend of Iowa getting, wide receivers drafted into the NFL.
I'll say this too about Ihmir. I think once people got a chance to really look at the tape about what he did last season, I think the stats are a little bit deceiving, because Iowa's inability to complete the downfield pass game was a big part of that. But you can go back on the tape and just watch his one-on-one reps. He was getting open downfield. And while it doesn't translate over the stats part of it, I think still plays a significant role when scouts actually have a chance to go watch your individual film. It's like, okay, well, if the quarterback was in a better position to be able to get him the ball there, like an NFL starting caliber quarterback, Ihmir has proven that he can catch it and create big plays. He's created so many dynamic big plays. So, I mean, how many of these lists were like, oh, Ihmir Smith-Marsette could be a late round steal? I mean, it really felt like in the last week heading up to the draft that so many people were talking about that. So it's surprising to me he still went before Davion, I think, but about where he went, that's not really surprising. And I think that it's such a good situation for him because there's such a need right now in Minnesota for a third wide receiver. And I think if Ihmir can come in and take advantage of his opportunities, I'm interested to see if he will be able to stick on that roster. And to go back to how Kelton Copeland sort of revamped this Iowa wide receiver room, I think a couple of things keep in mind, at least from my perspective. One, he had changed the culture of it, just in terms of you go to Iowa, okay, you're going to be blocking. Like there's no way you really go watch, pay attention to you, no swagger, do it, whatever. I think Kelton Copeland came in and just said, look, this is my room. I'm going to make the most of it. He's established a strong culture, just sort of changed the mindsets of a lot of these guys coming in. He's a young, relatable guy on the recruiting trail. And I know you've gotten the chance to be involved in at least one interview with him. I don't know if you've been with two or not. I mean, he's as impressive as they come when it comes to speaking with the media. He's articulate, he's honest, he's transparent, and there's a lot of depth into what he says. It's nothing you just take at surface value. He's a guy that I think really cares about. You talk about a guy that cares about getting into coaching and doing it for the right reasons and really just has a love and burning desire to do it. I think Kelton Copeland fits that mold. And I think when he's on the recruiting trail with these high caliber sort of receivers who have offers from places, it does resonate with these guys. And I think the relationship aspect is so prominent to it. And I will bring this up too, not to dwell on this, but Iowa kept these guys after everything that happened last summer. And Keegan Johnson's been very outspoken and said, look, my relationship with Kelton Copeland is the reason why I stuck with Iowa and I never wavered, because he was honest with him. They just had such a strong bond and a strong relationship. And I think that does go a long way when you establish a culture and you establish sort of that mindset that you're coming to Iowa to be a wide receiver. It's not like it used to be. It's revamping it and making it cool and modernizing it. And I think that's exactly what he's done.
Yeah, I think Keegan had spoken to me and said that, he was confident. There's a train coming and interrupting this podcast. I apologize if someone can hear it. So there was I think he was saying that the coaches were very open and honest about how they were going to go about changing the culture and making it a more healthy environment. I do want to bring up some of these little facts that I'm pulling from Mike Colos's article that he wrote today. Just 2 Iowa running backs have been drafted in 22 years. One of them being Liddell Betts, who's now a running backs coach at Iowa. So that'll be interesting is, if we see Tyler Goodson being drafted next year too. And then we've got Iowa is tied for 16th in the NFL draftees over the last 5 years. So with 20, they've had 20 players. So that's more than any other program in the Big Ten West and 4th most in the conference behind Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. So, even though Iowa didn't have somebody within the first 3 rounds.
And Chauncey.
Yeah, Chauncey was in 4th. Okay, still trying to remember.
No, yeah. Chauncey was in 3rd, wasn't he?
Was he at 3rd or was it at 3rd? 84th overall pick. It would be 3rd, right?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, it was a 3rd. It was the 3rd.
It's 3rd pass. So there we go. But then the Hawkeyes haven't had a skill position. That would be quarterback, running back, wide receiver, player taken in the 1st round since quarterback Chuck Long and running back Ronnie Harmon in 1985. We know what Iowa's known for, but I'm also wondering, you bring in Betts as a running backs coach who knows how to get this done, knows how to be at that next level. And then you've got Kelton Copeland who's leading this wide receiving core. And I wonder if we're going to start seeing more skill position players come out of Iowa and go into the NFL, especially running the offense that they do. Whereas the offenses down south don't always translate to the NFL, especially since, you've got running backs up here. They got to learn how to catch. They got to learn how to block. They got to learn how to run, right? They can't just do one thing.
I'll say this too, and we've heard Kirk Ferentz countless times over the years say, hey, we run it like an NFL team. And that's also why a lot of those guys translate the NFL. And that's why even GMs and scouts will say, Kirk Ferentz team, guys don't bust, because they get in there. They already know what's going on. There's really not much of a transition. And as far as, by the way, I think the Liddell Betts hire, I thought it was a home run. It was an obvious sort of pick. I think when the running back job came open, there was some speculation about Liddell. Despite not having a lot of zero college experience, but the resume don't lie. And I think you asked him about the transition going from high school to college when he hasn't really been at college. And I think his answer is completely fair-minded and just real when he said, I played at a high level at this program. So he knows under Kirk Ferentz, he knows the culture already. He knows a lot of the people within the program. He knows the offense. He played it at an extremely high level and he got to the NFL. Those are all such big selling points, in my opinion, especially on the recruiting trail. I think the hardest part for him, I think he said it too, as part of that answer, is what are the rules and logistics about going on the recruiting trail? What stuff can or can't do? But again, as far as Iowa having young, exciting, relatable coaches with a wealth of football knowledge, I really think that they've continued, especially over the last year and a half or so, they've really nailed down these guys that are replacing. I think George Barnett's an outstanding hire when you look at his resume. Like I said, Liddell Betts, I think, is going to be a very good recruiter, and he knows the position. He knows what it takes to play at a high level in the Big Ten Conference and in the NFL. So those are some crazy stats, though. It's
They're
not simple.
I will correct myself because I kind of stuttered on one of them. So, just 2 Iowa running backs have been drafted in 22 years. So that's Liddell Betts and Sean Green. So that was 2009 for Green, 2002 for Betts. By the way, the Hawkeyes have had a player taken in every NFL draft since 1978. So that's 44 years in a row. Michigan State just had its streak snapped on Saturday.
At 80, right?
80 years. Yeah, look at that. Trivia question. Almost feel like you should join us for our ultimate shameless plug, ultimate
shameless plug. Nice.
Sam Paxton and I hosting with DraftKings. So y'all sign up.
Are we really quick? Are we ever gonna be able to get rid of your y'all accent, or are you just gonna super modernize that into Iowa?
Oh, we're not getting rid of it. I don't think I have that much of an accent though.
No. But the y'all, I mean,
the y'all is gonna be there forever.
All right, I figured.
What, you think I'm gonna say you guys, like use guys? Like, what do y'all say?
But use well, okay. Who says use guys?
Enough friends to walk up to a group of people and be like,
my
y'all.
Gosh.
All right.
Y'all.
Like, I just think people be like, y'all, whereas like I can walk up to my posse and be like, hey y'all, how's it going? I don't know. We cannot verify whether or not David has friends.
All I'll say is I'm roasting you about that, and I will 100% catch myself saying y'all a few times, and I'm gonna be mad every single time I say y'all now.
It is not an exclusively Southern thing. I have heard it in the Midwest. I've heard it in Colorado. It's really not.
It's a Southern staple, though.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like you said, as far as like the skill, I did want to bring this up to go back to the skill position, guys. I know people will scoff at this, but it's a reality. Iowa's recruiting better. Like they're recruiting at a higher level than they have been over the past few years. Their trajectory is up, and as a result, you're seeing younger players get more time early. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I mean, Iowa was 26th last year by 24/7 rankings.
When you say recruiting better, in what context? Would you say better players overall, or would you crack it up to like in terms of stars next to their name?
I think it somewhat goes hand in hand. I think they're getting guys that still fit the Iowa system, but they're landing more top targets. I know they struck out on tight ends last year. They struck out on running backs last year due to obviously different reasons. But again, look at the wide receivers. Who are the two wide receivers already making waves in this group? It's the 2 4-stars 2021 guys. They were 26th in the recruiting rankings last year, which is one of the highest in the Kirk Ferentz era. I think only 2005 was the last class that was better, and I think they were ranked 6th or 7th overall at that time. But Iowa over the last 4 years has continued to get better and better. But I also think that correlates into getting guys like Kelton Copeland in the mix, like Derek Foster. And Tim Polisek was a great recruiter for Iowa, all the guys that he's brought in. So, I think George Barnett has some pressure in that regard, but Iowa offensive line typically does sell itself, and the defensive line, I think, is starting to kind of get to that point. But again, Justin Jacobs, 4-star All-American guy, Luke Lachey, All-American tight end. So it doesn't take anything away from Iowa's development, but I still think it's worth noting that Kirk Ferentz, while he's getting older, I do think that they've done a good job for the most part of adapting to modernizing the recruiting process to get guys that fit the bill. And these guys are coming in more ready to go.
Yeah. I mean, and like you said, offensive line, defensive line selling itself. Another fact I will pull up is Iowa has had 10 first-round picks under Ferentz. 5 were offensive linemen, 3 were tight ends, and the others were a linebacker and a defensive lineman. So again, that is the reputation that has shown, that has been proven to excel here at Iowa, but that certainly could change. I'm excited for Liddell Betts to do some maybe Southern recruiting. He's got some footing in those Florida schools. Florida high school football is up there with Texas, like just as good. And, if you can sell some of those guys on the winters up in Iowa, I don't know, it could be like a menacing team that we've got here on our hands. But we've got to wrap things up. David, I do want to thank you for coming on the podcast. I do want to ask you, for people who are out there, is it 24/7 sports or is it 247 sports? What is it?
it's 24/7 sports, but I mean, it's sort of just whatever. I think people know what you talk about when you say 247 or 24/7. I just stopped correcting people. I'm like, okay, well, that's it.
I always
It's all
say
good.
24/7 because I think that's what it makes sense, right? You're cranking out articles 24/7, drinking way too much coffee and other things.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And you're literally just brought a mug. Is there coffee in there? Or are you like literally?
No, there's coffee.
All right, David, tell people
Probably
where
better.
they can find your content, which is pretty obvious, but yeah, plug your stuff.
Yeah, HawkeyeInsider.com, 24/7 sports. Find me on Twitter at my unverified Twitter, by the way.
Yeah,
At
unverified,
David
no blue
Eickholt.
check mark.
At David Eickholt, and at Hawkeyes on 247. Leah, I've had fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll have you back again soon. And thank you all for listening to the On Iowa podcast. You can check out my content on the Gazette.com and stay tuned. We will be having a podcast with the field hockey team on Wednesday, who just made the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. So y'all have a good one.